2 days later, everything exploded. My parents filed a civil lawsuit. According to their complaint, Carter Dynamics had always been intended as a family enterprise. They claimed my father had secretly financed the company's early development. They alleged I had promised to transfer ownership once the business became profitable. None of it was true. But lawsuits don't have to be true. They only have to sound believable. News spread fast. Business blogs picked up the story. Local television stations called for interviews. Headlines questioned who really owned the company. Competitors started contacting our clients. Employees grew nervous. One morning I walked through headquarters and noticed conversations stopping as I passed. People smiled. But I could see uncertainty. That evening, I gathered everyone in the auditorium. Over 400 employees filled the room. No cameras. No reporters. Just us. I stepped onto the stage. I know you've heard the rumors. The room became perfectly still. My parents have accused me of stealing a company I created. A few people shook their heads in disbelief. I can't discuss every legal detail. But I can promise you one thing. I will never allow anyone to endanger your jobs because of greed. The applause wasn't loud. It was something better. It was sincere. For the first time in weeks. I didn't feel alone. 3 months later, the trial began. Federal Courthouse. Austin, Texas. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Journalists. Investors. Employees. Even competitors. My parents entered holding hands. They smiled for cameras. Anyone watching would have thought they were victims. I barely recognized them. When I took the witness stand, Olivia asked simple questions first. How the company started. How funding was obtained. Who owned the shares. Everything was supported by tax records, bank statements, investment contracts, and board minutes. Then came cross-examination. My parents' attorney stood. Mr. Carter, isn't it true your father encouraged your entrepreneurial ambitions? Yes. And he offered advice? Yes. And your mother supported you emotionally? Yes. So without them, Carter Dynamics wouldn't exist. I looked directly at the jury. My elementary school teacher encouraged me too. She doesn't own my company. A few jurors smiled. The attorney changed tactics. He introduced the forged documents. They bear your signature. Olivia stood immediately. Objection. The judge nodded. Proceed with foundation. That was our moment. The forensic handwriting expert testified first. Then the cybersecurity specialists. Then the travel records. Then the conference footage. Then metadata from the original files. Each witness removed another brick from my parents' story. Until almost nothing remained. Finally, Olivia requested permission to present the final exhibit. A security video. It came from my father's accountant's office. The accountant had recently accepted immunity in exchange for truthful testimony. The courtroom lights dimmed. The video began playing. There sat my father. Across from him sat the accountant. My mother entered carrying a folder. The audio was crystal clear. Dad slid several blank pages across the desk. We've practiced Ethan's signature enough. Mom answered quietly. Once ownership changes, he'll never be able to reverse it. Nobody in the courtroom moved. The recording continued. The accountant looked nervous. What if he finds out? My father laughed. He's too busy making money. The video ended. Silence. Absolute silence. My father stared at the floor. My mother began crying. Not because she'd been caught. Because the lie had failed. The judge removed his glasses. He looked first at my parents. Then at the evidence stacked across his bench. Finally, he spoke. Fraud committed by strangers is serious. He paused. Fraud committed by parents against their own child is among the most disturbing abuses of trust this court has seen. No one breathed. The judge continued. The forged documents are declared void. The attempted transfer of ownership is permanently invalidated. The matter is referred for criminal investigation. Then he looked directly at my parents. Your scheme ends in this courtroom today. I closed my eyes. Not because I wanted revenge. Because after months of fear, it was finally over. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps. Microphones surrounded me. One journalist asked the question everyone wanted answered. Do you forgive your parents? I thought carefully before responding. I won't spend my life hating them. But forgiveness doesn't erase accountability. They made their choices. I'll make mine. That afternoon, I returned to Carter Dynamics. Employees lined both sides of the lobby. Someone started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire building erupted in applause. I wasn't celebrating a legal victory. I was celebrating that the people who had trusted me never lost the company we'd built together. A month later, I created a permanent employee ownership trust, ensuring that no single individual including me could ever secretly seize control of the company. The board unanimously approved it. I also established a scholarship for first-generation entrepreneurs. Because I wanted people with dreams not connections to have the chance I almost lost. I haven't spoken to my parents since the trial. Some people think that's cruel. Maybe they're right. But I've learned something success never taught me. Being family doesn't give someone ownership of your future. Love isn't measured by what people say when you're struggling. It's measured by what they do when you succeed. And sometimes, the greatest inheritance you can leave behind isn't money. It's the courage to protect everything you built, even from the people you once trusted most. End of production script. I used to believe success would solve everything. I thought if I worked hard enough, stayed honest, and made something meaningful, the people who loved me would be proud of what I'd built. Looking back now, I realize I confused pride with ownership. My name is Ethan Carter, and 3 months ago my parents tried to steal the company I'd spent 13 years building. Not a few shares. Not a percentage. Everything. By the time they were finished, they expected to own a business valued at nearly $50 million while leaving me with nothing but the title of founder. They almost succeeded. What saved me wasn't luck. It was one tiny mistake they never imagined I'd notice. To understand how everything unraveled, you need to know where it all started. When I graduated from the University of Texas, I had exactly $4,000 in savings, a used Honda Civic, and an apartment so small the kitchen sink nearly touched my bed. My parents thought I was wasting my degree. My father wanted me working for his construction company. It pays real money, he used to tell me. Computers are a hobby. I disagreed. I believed businesses would someday depend entirely on software that could predict equipment failures before they happened. Nobody believed me. Not investors. Not banks. Certainly not my parents. For 4 years, I survived on instant noodles, freelance coding jobs, and about 4 hours of sleep every night. There were weeks I wasn't sure I could afford electricity. But slowly, my software improved. The first breakthrough came when a regional manufacturing company agreed to test my predictive maintenance platform. 3 months later, they reduced downtime by 32%. Then another client signed. Then another. By year 7, Carter Dynamics employed 60 people. By year 10, more than 300. When a major technology investment firm acquired a minority stake, independent analysts valued the company at nearly $50 million. The newspapers called me one of Austin's fastest-rising entrepreneurs. My parents suddenly became very interested in visiting. It started innocently enough. My mother insisted on bringing homemade dinners to my office. My father began introducing himself to employees as the reason I'd become successful. I laughed it off. Families exaggerate. That's what I told myself. One Friday evening, after a board meeting, Dad stood in my executive office overlooking downtown Austin. "You've done well," he said. I smiled. "Thanks." He walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You know." He paused. "This company should stay in the family." "It already is," I answered. He shook his head. "No. I mean legally." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned toward me. "You're not married. No kids. If something happens to you, the company could end up anywhere. I've already planned for that." His expression changed. "What plan?" "My estate attorney has everything organized." His smile disappeared. He changed the subject almost immediately. At the time, I didn't think much about it. That conversation should have terrified me. Instead, I forgot about it. 2 weeks later, my assistant walked into my office carrying a large envelope marked "Confidential." It came by certified mail. I opened it. Inside was a packet from the Texas Secretary of State's office acknowledging receipt of amended corporate governance documents. My stomach tightened. I hadn't filed anything. At first I assumed it was a clerical mistake. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The documents listed Richard Carter, my father, as chairman of the board. I read the page 3 times. Then 4. It had my signature. Except, it wasn't my signature. Someone had copied it almost perfectly. Almost. There was one tiny difference. Whenever I signed official documents, I always crossed the T in Carter with a long horizontal stroke that extended beyond the last letter. The signature on those papers stopped exactly at the T. Most people would never notice. I noticed instantly. Someone had practiced my signature. But they hadn't practiced enough. For a long moment, I simply stared out my office window. The city looked exactly the same. Cars flowed through traffic. People hurried along the sidewalks. Employees laughed in the break room down the hall. The world hadn't changed. Mine had. I picked up my phone and called the only person I trusted with something this serious. "Olivia," I said as soon as she answered. "I need you." Her voice immediately sharpened. "What's wrong?" "I think someone forged corporate documents." There was a brief silence. Then she asked the question that would haunt me for weeks. "Who benefits?" I looked down at the papers again. At the names. At the signatures. At the newly assigned positions. My throat felt dry. I stopped. Because saying it aloud made it real. "I think it's my parents." Olivia didn't react with disbelief. She simply said, "Don't confront anyone. Lock every digital record, preserve those documents, and meet me in 30 minutes. That calm response kept me from making the biggest mistake of my life. If I had stormed into my parents' house demanding answers, they would have destroyed every piece of evidence before sunrise. Instead, I drove straight to Olivia's office, carrying the envelope like it contained a live grenade. She spread every page across the conference table, reading each line in complete silence. The longer she read, the more serious her expression became. Finally, she looked up. "Ethan. These weren't filed by amateurs." My heart sank. "What does that mean?" She tapped the paperwork gently. "It means whoever did this understood corporate law well enough to make everything appear legitimate." I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my breathing. "Can they actually take my company?" Olivia held my gaze for a long moment. If we had discovered this 6 months later. She paused. Our conversation would be very different. Olivia's words echoed in my head the entire night. If we had discovered this 6 months later, our conversation would be very different. I barely slept. Every memory involving my parents suddenly felt different. Every family dinner. Every birthday. Every unexpected visit to the office. Every question my father had asked about board meetings. Every time my mother insisted she was just proud. Had they been planning this all along? The next morning, Olivia and I met with a forensic document examiner and a cybersecurity team. Within hours, we discovered something even worse. The forged documents weren't the only problem. Someone had attempted to access my encrypted shareholder portal 6 different times over the previous 3 months. The login attempts had failed. But the locations caught everyone's attention. One came from my parents' home internet connection. Another from my father's office. The room became silent. Olivia slowly closed the laptop. They weren't guessing. They knew exactly what they were looking for. That afternoon, we quietly contacted every board member. No emails. No conference calls. Only face-to-face meetings. I expected panic. Instead, every single director had the same reaction. "We're with you." One board member leaned forward. "Ethan, if someone is willing to forge ownership documents, they're willing to destroy the company too." That sentence changed everything. This wasn't just about me anymore. 400 employees depended on Carter Dynamics. Families depended on those paychecks. Clients trusted our software to keep billion-dollar operations running. I wasn't protecting a fortune. I was protecting hundreds of lives connected to the company. Over the next week, Olivia's legal team uncovered a trail that looked like something from a financial crime documentary. A family trust had quietly been amended. My father's longtime accountant had signed as a witness. A retired attorney who had known my parents for years had notarized documents claiming I had voluntarily transferred controlling voting rights into the trust. There was only one problem. On the date those documents claimed I signed them, I was speaking at a technology conference in Seattle. There were flight records, hotel records, conference videos, hundreds of witnesses. Someone hadn't just forged paperwork. They had built an entire fictional timeline. Olivia smiled for the first time in days. "They're getting sloppy." Then something happened that hurt more than anything we'd found. My mother called. "Ethan, sweetheart, why haven't you visited?" Her voice sounded warm. Loving. Exactly like every Sunday phone call she'd ever made. I almost answered normally. Almost. Instead, I asked one question. "Mom, have you ever lied to me?" There was a pause. Long enough to notice. Then she laughed. "What kind of question is that?" I closed my eyes. Because innocent people answer immediately. People hiding something by time. "I love you," she finally said. But families shouldn't question each other. I ended the call. Without saying goodbye. That hurt more than discovering the fraud.